Okay, folks, so for this particular assignment, you've been asked to get a Cancer Meetians paper that is of a middle gray. So what we have here is a middle gray sheet of paper, all right? And so the reason why we're doing this is because we are going to use the value of this paper and incorporate it as part of the values for your drawing, okay? So it is important then that you get a middle gray sheet of Cancer Meetians paper. Okay, and how do you determine that? So if you look at your color wheel, you'll see on your color wheel itself a grayscale or value scale. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with a grayscale, right? One end is the extreme white, the other end is the extreme black, and then you have all the varying grays in between the two extremes, okay? So if you don't know what kind of gray you're getting, make sure that you take that color wheel with you with the grayscale and you match it up, that middle gray on that grayscale, and you match it up with the gray paper that you're purchasing. Okay, so in other words, get a sheet of gray paper that's neither too light nor too dark. So like a middle gray, all right? And what's going to happen is that with your white charcoal pencil and your HB General's black charcoal pencil, you're going to use these two values and you're going to create values on your drawing, and by actively incorporating the gray of the paper as part of the values that you see in the still lifes. Okay, so you've noticed that I've already sketched out the still life and I've sketched it out with white charcoal pencil. So to me, I find it easier to just sketch everything out in white and then erase where, say, that's a black object here. I would go in then and remove the white and then put the black, and draw with the black pencil. It's easier to start off drawing everything out in white charcoal pencil because I find that it's a little bit more forgiving than to draw everything out in black charcoal pencil, or to draw objects that I perceive as white with white charcoal pencil, objects that are black with black charcoal pencil is just too much. All right, so the easiest thing to do for me is, to just draw everything out, construct everything out in white charcoal pencil, and then just erase the areas where it's dark and then switch to my black charcoal pencil. Okay, so the other thing too that I want to point out is that when you're drawing this, this still life using this particular method, I want you to think about a few things that you should do. Okay, so the first thing is this: when you're looking at the values, please make sure that you squint. So what that means is that make sure that you squint. So then what you're doing is controlling the amount of light that goes through your eyes. You're activating the rod cells in your eyes so that you can see the values better. Okay, so every time you're looking at your still life object and you're trying to figure out what value it is, just squint so that you can see the values much clearer. Okay, then the other thing that I would approach, this is my method, like when I'm drawing in anything, whether I'm using gray paper or I'm using white paper or black paper, whatever, even a color drawing, I always pick out the lightest lights and the darkest darks. Why? Because it's the easiest values to spot. So like this black object, that's pretty easy. It's like a black object, and then the white objects, the areas that's the lightest, I'll draw those first because those are the easiest to figure out. It's the sort of the middle grays, the light grays, the light grays that are kind of difficult to figure out. Like you're not quite sure what kind of gray that is, how dark it is, how light it is. So it's easier to figure that out once you've established the lightest lights and the darkest darks, okay? Because those are the easiest values to spot, all right? So, this particular method, what we're going to do is that we're going to use cross-hatching, and we're using like the HB General's charcoal pencil, the white charcoal pencil, and we want to make sure that you don't mix the two pencils when you're drawing. And that's why I told you earlier that I drew this out in white because it's easier, it's more forgiving. And then if I were to draw this can is black, I would gently erase the can so that the outline is sort of erased, but I can still see the ghost mark, and then go back in with my black charcoal pencil. I don't want to mix the two, okay? So please make sure that when you're drawing, do not mix the two pencils together, okay? keep them separate, but actively use the value of this paper, this gray, middle gray value as part of the value for your drawing. All right, so let's just begin, okay? And please make sure you have a sheet of paper, just so that once you've drawn, you can use this and as sort of to protect your drawing, so that when you're drawing, you don't drag your charcoal all over your drawing and smudge your drawing. The other thing that you want to make sure is that please sharpen your pencil constantly. Make sure your pencil is sharp and draw with a point. So don't draw at an angle so that you're using the side of the pencil. Please don't do that, because what will happen is that you're going to create like large marks, and you won't be able to get like this really beautiful fine line, okay? So we're going to start off with something like this here. I've already sketched it out, I've measured out my proportions, they're right, I looked at my perspective, they seem correct. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on this cube here, just parts of it, and then part of this can. So notice that I've already drawn this out in white, but like I said, I'm looking for like the lightest lights and the darkest dark. This obviously is the really dark, but here, just this cube itself, I can see very clear separations of value. So I'm just going to work on this. And it's very obvious that this is a darker part, this is pretty dark. So let's just go ahead and do that, all right? So I'm going to take my kneader eraser, and I'm just going to kind of gently erase some of this line. So you can see now that I've erased it, and I was pretty light-handed when I was drawing it, but you can still see a ghost of the line, okay? And why am I doing this? Why am I erasing my drawing? It's because I don't want to mix. Remember I mentioned that just now, don't mix. But it's easier to draw in white because it's more forgiving. They leave a ghost, but it's a very gentle ghost, and it could be you could still see it after you erase it, but it doesn't interfere with the drawing. So I've already erased it. I can see my ghost guideline. So I'm just going to go ahead and put down or draw a mark here. I'm just going to go ahead and put that edge down, okay? Now, I'm just drawing it freehand. This is what I recommend. Some of us here have a really, really hard time drawing a straight line, okay? And if that's the case, what you can do is you can use a ruler, draw a line very gently, and then go over it with your pencil so that it looks more like natural, okay? So if you cannot draw a straight line to sort of like for the life, well, to save your life, then use a ruler and then go over it gently with your pencil. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw the edge here, and I'm going to start cross hatching, okay? So right now you can see there's a line, and what we're going to do is that we're going to turn this line into an edge, okay? Because in real life there's really no lines unless you're doing like a contour drawing, but everything else is edges. Everything is in edges. So here, for example, it's a line. It's the reason why it's a line right now because this is darker than its surroundings. So you read this as a line. But the minute I start shading and my value reads the same as this line will disappear and it becomes an edge. And that's really important. We don't want an outline. But we need to put that line down in the first place to figure out where this edge ends and where this other edge begins, okay? So notice that this is hatch marks, and you don't have to please don't do this. This is like huge. These hatch marks are huge, okay? So don't do that because it's harder to create the value or the gradation of values if you shape with such big strokes. Make small marks. So I've made some hatch marks, okay, at a diagonal, and then I'm cross hatching now. But make small marks and pay attention to the value and just keep moving. Okay, let's see whether we can try and cross hatch quickly. Don't stay in one spot because that would make it really dark. And you know what? Okay, let's just do this. Let's just pretend that I'm so gung-ho and I'm so excited. Well, I am excited, but But say I'm like really gung-ho and I like forget, I just keep cross-hatching and I'm stuck in one spot. And I realize that maybe that's too dark. No big deal. Remember, we did that earlier. We learned about using the tools. So you could just take this and dab it. So you remove some of that. Okay? You haven't smudged it. Okay? Remember, knead your eraser a little bit. Pull out some. Or find another clean spot. Get that out. And then go back in and cross-hatch over that. Gently, small marks. Now, how does this work? Again, we're using the gray of the paper as an active part of your drawing. So basically, this is what you have to remember. Anything on your still life that's light and lighter than your gray value of your paper, you add white. The lighter the object is, or the lighter the value is, the more layers of white you add. Okay? The keyword is layers, okay? So don't add with pressure, but add with layers. So the lighter the value is, add more layers. The darker the value is, so let me go back. The lighter the value is, add more layers of white. And that applies to the dark values as well. As the darker values they are on the still life, add more layers of black. Okay, so anything that's lighter than the middle gray, add white. Anything that's darker than the middle gray, add black. Okay, and with that, some areas you may find that it's the same value. So what happens? What happens if this, say, let's just say this whole area here is the same value. On that still life is the same value as the gray of your paper. So with the understanding that I've just said anything lighter add white, anything darker add black. So you would potentially just leave this the color of the paper, the gray of the paper. Yes, that would be technically correct, but then like visually, you should not do that, okay? If you left this just the value of the paper, because it's the same value on the still life, then technically it's correct, but visually it would look like you ran out of time. It's unfinished. You didn't get to drawing that part. So I would say to you, add a little bit white or add a little bit black accordingly. The only time you can sort of leave, or I find that it's helpful to leave some of the areas empty, is when you're drawing a shiny object or a glassy object. So you can leave little strips of empty sort of like areas where you don't shape, okay? So let's do this very quickly. And you continue. Okay, and now I'm going to use this to do this other side. And I see that it's pretty light, so I'm going to go ahead. Now this is the other thing that you should remember is this, that as you're drawing, every like 15 minutes or so, you need to step back. Step back and look at your drawing. See whether compare your values, compare your proportions, compare your perspective. Okay, I'm cross-hatching here. Stepping back and looking at your drawing is really important, and you need to do that throughout your drawing. If you're not sure whether your value is right or your proportion is right, especially if your proportion or your perspective is right, turn your drawing upside down, or take your drawing right side up, and bring it to a mirror and look at it in the mirror. And the reason I say that is because anything that looks wrong or skewed will show up very quickly in the mirror. You will be able to see, it's very apparent. Okay, I'm just going to continue shading. All right. Okay. So let's enhance that corner. Notice that I'm using both pencils at once, but I'm not mixing them. And I'm allowing some of that gray to come through. Okay, I'm shading, but I'm incorporating some of that value of that paper with my shading.